August 2016 live Q&A. This month we have Machine Head. Is there anybody out there? Al and Joey are both on vacation this weekend, and I am just back from vacation, so it's really nice to be back and get to hang out with you guys and answer some questions. So load up your questions, and Amrish is going to ask questions, and I'm gonna endlessly talk. So, shall we?
All right, so let's start. Asher asked the first question. What should a metal rhythm guitar tone sound mixing? I'm getting better at poking holes at EQing, but I feel my source tones are the main issue now. And he's just using DIs and amps
Okay, hold on.
right
Let me
now
read the
as far
question
as
again
what
because
he's working with.
audio was dropping. Okay, what should a metal rhythm guitar tone sound like before mixing? Getting better at poking holes with EQ, but I feel my source tones are the main issue now. Okay, Asher, that's a really difficult question to answer. And I've kind of got a long story that goes along with this. For many, many years, when you listen to, going back when I started recording and as I progressed in my recording, I remember specifically coming up against the same problem. Like you listen to the guitar tones on a record and you're like, oh, that's awesome. But you always wonder, what did the guitar sound like before it got turned into that? Because obviously there was a bunch of EQ, maybe some compression, saturation. There's so many different things you can do to a guitar in a mix. So the question is really, what does a raw DI tone sound like? Because I always, what do Andy Sneap sound like, or Colin Richardson's, or anybody who's ripping out amazing guitar tones. And I sat down and one day with a guitar amp and I recorded every inch of the speaker. I would move the mic like that much in every single row. And I sat back and I would reamp like a certain section of a song and I would just listen and try to find a guitar tone using like a rig that would be, I'd like look up the rig on an album. So for example, maybe it was a Mesa Oversized with a 57, a 50. And I live in kind of like an amp sim world now, so it's a little bit different. But if you got some real amps and you really want to learn how to get your real amp tones a lot closer to what you're hearing on a record, I feel like it's worth it to sit down or out towards the edge of the speaker or the very edge of the speaker, and then you go up an inch and do that on every speaker. Compare what different speakers sound like and how they displace air. Try
So
different
what's the
distances. It's a homework project, and it's something you can something that's very difficult. And if there's something I see when I'm mixing records that come in is when people record their own guitars, 98% of the mic tones are absolute garbage. And then like when I record or like mix a really awesome high level band that's on a label, usually guitar tones come in really awesome because they've worked with somebody who's very good. So, like for example, I think the Machine Head guitar tone on these stems is really good. Am I coming in way louder? Dave's saying, I don't know how to increase my volume on this. Hold on, let me just check this real quick. Yeah, I'm not sure. So I'll just try to talk louder. I mean, this should be pretty loud. So sorry if we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're just going to carry on because I don't know how to fix any of them yet. So, okay. So anyways, like the Machine Head guitars sound pretty good by themselves. I'm going to do a lot of EQ, and I did do a lot of EQ on the record. And I feel like almost every guitar tone ever recorded has taken a lot of EQ. So it is really hard to go and backtrack and kind of just like figure out necessarily like what the raw DNA of a great guitar tone sounds like. But like I said, the closest you can do is go record a bunch of different guitars, pick or I mean like different mic positions, not guitars. Pick the, let's say 5 or 6 spots on the cabinet that really sound like finished tones to you. Make a note and like tape those spots off on the cabinet or make like a mental note where they are and try to like EQ those and see what results you get in the mix. Because you have a DAW now, you guys could literally record 200 tracks of guitars and have them all be different with different positions and compare and EQ and mix all of those tones. So if you have a 57 and you have 8 different positions that you think sound great, and you try all 8 tones and you try to EQ all 8 of them, see which 2 or 3 of those tones generally stack up in a mix and sound the most professional. Now, I mean, a lot of guys have different strategies and opinions on miking a guitar amp. Like believe Sneap is like center of the cabinet, back an inch. Guys like Adam D go back 3 inches. Some guys like where the circle, like the grill meets a dust cap, or I don't remember what the technical term is, just that part where it goes, the center of the cone. People like miking around there. Some people like super close, some people proximity effects, some people like an inch back, 2 inches. You just got to experiment and see how stuff holds, or on axis versus off axis, etc. You really got to do your homework, but it's a hard to answer question because it's not something I can physically describe to you, Asher. I feel like it's something that with experience, when you're recording guitars, and after many years of recording them and engineering them and mixing them, you gain that bit of experience in them where you just know, you're like, okay, that sounds like it's going to be a great guitar in the mix. I would say the characteristics you're looking for are balance. Like you want a really good low end to it, nothing that's flubby. You want a nice top end that isn't super fizzy and a good mid-range definition. If you have a really nice balanced guitar tone that has some presence but isn't harsh, that has mid-range clarity but isn't super boxy and has a good tight bottom end, I feel like that's what you're looking for because you can sculpt that better in a mix if you need to. So that's my long-winded tangential answer. All right, next question. Oh, did Amrish freeze? You did. Okay, I'm just going to go down the line here, guys, and keep moderating. It looks like I lost Amrish. Let me see if I can get him back in here. Nothing is working today when you want it to work. All right, I'm just going to keep going. So next question. Okay, let me figure out where we left off. Hold on, this is a massive chat. Okay, Ivan's asking, how do you set up an amp for extra low tunings, drop G? I'm having a hard time getting the 5150 to sound good. That's an interesting question because I feel like the 5150 is especially great at getting something like a drop G guitar to sound great because it's got a lot of upper mid-range. And generally I start it with everything at 50%, like 5 or whatever. And then you kind of, I'm just trying to think of strategies. You kind of start from there. A lot of it in drop G, I think, is about more necessarily the string gauge you get and the way you pick the guitar and the type of pickups that you have. If you have the correct string gauge pickups, guitar, getting the amp to be dialed in really great is a lot easier because an amp to me is like a post process in guitar recording. Example, I was mixing something this morning and the guitar DIs were terrible. The tone sounded like shit. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get a lot of clarity out of my guitar tone, no matter how much gain I used, because the guitar player wasn't very good. And the guy who recorded it didn't do the best job recording it. So really, it starts at the player and it starts with the hands. And unfortunately, I know that doesn't help you because when you trying to dial in a tone, it's a downstream. So always look at the amp as like a secondary effect. The primary is what instrument you're playing and how you're playing it. And if you're getting it great coming out, sounding great coming out of your amp, then it's an issue of miking or setting something on the amp. So start there and work there. 5150, I would start at flat, maybe drop down some of the low mids, bring the presence up to like 8, treble like 5 or 6, bass probably around half, and just start there and then tweak as you need. You don't want a ton of bass. You don't want it to be too bright, but you're going to definitely need some presence to get those low notes a cut. All right, next question. Vojan's asking for drums. How do you adjust the trigger for the snare to the rules at the beginning of the song playing properly? I have a problem triggering the snare with these rules. Okay, so in this particular song, is there anyone out there? I think I use the actual natural snare for the roll, but I use MIDI and I pick hard hits, and then I go and I draw in by hand, by ear, the softer velocities on the fills. And you guys will see it when I do nail the mix. So I would just say, just wait for the video and you'll see it. Tell us more about EQing guitars. That's a hard question to answer because I need something more specific. Okay, Asher, I already answered your question. Ivan asks, okay, wait, hold on, scrolling down. Okay, Vojan's asking, how do you use EQ on rhythm guitars on the machine head tracks? Of course, carving the EQ for that polished tone. the first thing is first on those guitars. There's a 50. Sorry, he's got a 5150. Mind me, guys, I have a little allergy in my nose. It's like going nuts. Um, Rob's got a 5150, and he's got a lot of low end bass and balls in his guitars, and I feel like I have to do a lot of thinning coming out of the gate. There's the 57 and the 421s. I feel like I used almost 90% 57s. I might have even cut out the 421s because the guitars are kind of, there's a little phasey sounding or like a little chorusy. I can't explain it, but it always sounded a little bit weird to me. And I tried to eliminate some of that weirdness. So I got rid of some of the double miking. But there's a lot of like low end. It's very low end heavy. And in my original mix, when I turned it into Monty Connor, he was like, dude, no way. And I dropped out all the low end of the guitars and made the guitars a lot more like classic Machine Head guitars. So I would say work on getting the bass, then the mid range, and then cleaning up the top end. And, you know, try not to change the tone too much because I feel like when Rob Flynn calls you and Rob's like, hey, I love my guitar tone, I'm stoked on it, you don't want to change it too much and you don't want to piss Rob Flynn off. So I definitely tried to keep the guitar tone as pure and real as possible without like nuking it. But it needed a lot of help on the low end because it was very, very like thuddy and thumpy down there. All right, next question. Travis is asking, so you're going for mixing quickly when you don't have enough time and you need to seriously engage the 80-20 rule. Which elements of the mix do you focus on first and which elements do you typically not focus on and leave to the end? Okay, Travis, for me, what's important and one of the most important things I've ever learned mixing is really to go with your gut feeling. You want to get to the point where you're struggling with the mix, where you're starting to like second guess things, and then usually you have to step away from it. I try to take advantage of as much gut momentum and as much, what's the word I'm looking for? Like as much initial excitement and inspiration when I'm mixing as possible. So when I sit down to mix and I'm going maybe an hour, 2 hours in, I'm like feeling great about it. And then I start getting critical, my brain turns on and I start thinking, and then I start nitpicking little things. And at that, I feel like you need to step away, get some perspective, listen to something else and come back and then see how it's sounding. But if it still sounds really good, I feel like you send it to the band right away because we can sit here and we can tweak the snare for 8 hours straight and like really optimize the snare sound to sound incredible. But if the band doesn't like the snare that you picked, if they don't like the tuning of the snare, it doesn't matter how great your snare sound is and the rest of your drum sound, they got to make sure. So the band is going to have feedback. For me, it's all about just getting the song to sound like a song, get it happening, you know, like feel like, yeah, this sounds pretty good. And then just send it to the band and see what the band says and see if you're like way off base, if you're pretty close, just a few tweaks or you nailed it. And try not to overthink it. So I feel like you kind of got to learn to let go. And it's very, very difficult for anybody mixing. All right, Mason is asking here, question for Joe. Lyko, how were the vocals treated? Weren't they separated into groups, example, backups, doubles, and so on, and EQ'd and treated like a group, or were they treated individually? Were they grouped? Okay, I like to mix in groups. So I like stereo groups because I like to use effects as inserts, and it makes it easier for automation for me if I want to do like delay throws or like ping pong and things like that. So I like to throw everything on pairs. I'll take like all my chorus vocal backgrounds and throw them on a group and my mains, and you guys can see this and some of the old nail to mix stuff that I've done. But I would say if you want particular routing for this Machine Head song, just watch when I actually mix the song here in I think next weekend, and we will take it from there. All right, Jack is asking, did you use all the cymbal spot mics in the final Machine Head mix and strip silence or automate them up and down? How did you approach panning the 3 overhead tracks? Okay, Jack, this particular drum setup I think is asymmetrical. So he's got one hard right, one hard left, and then one that's kind of like center to sort of left. So I kind of did something like this. I don't remember if I went center, or I don't remember if I did like 25% or something like that. But I just tried to get it set up because Dave McLean, the drummer from Machine Head, is a real naturist. Like, I met Dave the first time I sat down with them in Milwaukee, and they were playing a night with the Machine Head tour, and I'm hanging out with Dave on the bus. I'm like, nice to meet you. And he's like, I hate drum samples. And I'm like, I'll keep that in mind when I mix. He's like, no, listen, I absolutely hate drum samples. Like, I hate the way modern drums sound, blah, 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 blah. He just started going on. Like, he had a major unhappiness with it. So I came in and I kept that in mind when I was mixing. So I tried to use as much natural drumming as possible to make the kit sound as connected to the samples as I possibly could, while still making it sound modern. Because obviously, when Monty Connor and those guys came in, they were like, drums are too natural, and I'm like, okay, let me change a few things and go more robotic with it, and like make it sound more like a Colin Richardson mix or an Andy Sneap mix, like a little bit more like processed. And it ended up going in that direction. So I tried to make the kit a little bit more natural, filling in with room mics. I did use all of the spots, all the rooms, all the overheads. I used everything, and I tried to get as much actual natural kit sound as I could, and then reinforce it with some really loud direct triggers that were clipped up. And that was kind of like, the drum sound. I had to do a lot of automation, I think, on the room mics and things like that too, because I believe the hi-hat was super brutal. Or I don't know, like Dave he wants to hear all the little cymbal things he does, and he's just like a drummer that loves hearing himself play and wants to hear as much of him in his drum kit as possible. So it's always a struggle to mess with something like that, because, while the label and Rob want one thing, the drummer wants something else, but they still want to respect his opinion and his musicianship and honor it as much as possible while putting out something that's going to be conversely competitive, so his drums don't sound like Van Halen 1. So it's an interesting thing, but Dave's really into like 70s, like Rush and things like that. He just hates like modern drums. So I think finding a marriage to that, or getting him a mix where he was going to be happy, was probably one of the hardest things to do in this mix. So again, when we sit down and I mix it here in a week for you guys live, it's probably going to take me 2 days. We'll go through in detail all of those little pieces, and I'll show you guys exactly what I did. All right, Anthony is asking, 4 rhythm guitar tracks on each side did seem a little too much next to the natural drums and bass. Did you use all these tracks in the mix or cut it to get in clear? Any situations where you advise using drum samples in machine head mix? Well, Anthony, you have to use drum samples in a machine head mix if you want to be competitive with somebody like Colin Richardson. You got to keep an idea of the precedent a band has had before it. And for me, a guy like Colin is like one of my idols. So to have to walk into a mix and work on a band that's worked with Ross Robinson and Terry Date and Colin Richardson and et cetera, and people of that caliber, to have the opportunity to step into that, because in my mind, I'm just like, like those are my masters of mixing. Like those are the guys in producing. Like I grew up and I listened to those records, and like those are the guys I aspired to be. So to even have a shot to like work on a band like that was pretty intimidating, but at the same time, it was like challenge accepted. Like, holy shit, I'm getting a shot to actually like, I'm gonna have a mix and people are gonna compare it, and I'm gonna, and it's almost not fair, because you look at people like that as untouchable. So those guys set a precedent with that band and that band sound, and I feel like that precedent is not to be messed with. So you have to use drum samples, and I would make them as close to a classic machine head mix as possible, because think about old recording budgets, man. Those guys sat in studios for months, and they figured out every drum and every miking combination, and they experimented, and like they really built a sound for that band with that band. And they've had all these great producers who are really brilliant. Like they know what the hell they're doing at this point, and they know exactly what they want, exactly how they're supposed to sound. So I feel like your job is to make sure you carry the torch on that and don't drop it and do something that screws it up. Like, for example, the new Metallica. Metallica's always had great production for the time, except for And Justice for All, but they've also had the Black Album and Load and, some really amazing sounding albums. And that new song came out yesterday, and the new song is really cool. I really like it because I grew up listening to Metallica, but that mix is just, it's not right. Like that kick drum, and I don't know, like it should be remixed, because it doesn't sound like Metallica. And the guitar tone does, but I mean like the drumming and stuff like that. So, you want to stay true. Now, I will say, to answer your first question about 4 rhythm guitar tracks, yes, I did use 4 tracks because Machine Head uses 4 guitars, and you don't change what the precedent is when you're working with somebody like that. So, okay, hold on one second. Oh, you guys are commenting. Okay. I'm just making sure everything is still working. Okay, so next question, Mason's asking, hey Joel, for panning real strings in an orchestra or classical genre, the violins and violas are set to the same side with different depth. How do you go about panning them in a metal song once you've had tons of tracks? I tried a few different ways and ended up balancing them between both sides. Yeah, this was particularly difficult because me and Steve Lagudi, Steve is like Rob's front of house guy. He did like all the guitar tracking and vocal tracking on the bus. He was like helping Rob with the song, and then I was playing like producer, and we were going back, and like it was kind of like me and Steve and Rob. That was kind of like the brain center, and then there were some other engineers and some other guys that helped in some contributions. But Steve and I were like, Rob, you should record the quartet, like, or like a full orchestra or something. It should be done in a couple of takes and recorded that way. And he recorded it. It was done in individual strings. Now, I'm not sure why that was, or I didn't argue or whatever. I'm not going to sit there and argue with Rob and tell Rob how to do what Rob wants to do. But we definitely thought it should have been recorded slightly different. Because when I got to mix it, I was like, oh shit, there's like 4 violins on this part and then 4 violas here. And where do you put them? And I tried to like balance it like hard left, hard right kind of thing to just kind of add it. And I came in with the electronic strings that I programmed and wrote, and tried to use that to fill out some of the room and make it sound like more orchestral, and kind of get a marriage between the fake stuff and the real stuff, and find a balance. So the answer is, I think you got to experiment with the panning and try to find a place. It takes a lot of work to get those strings in there, and we're going to talk about that when we actually mix a song, but there's some tricks. Okay, Dave is asking, I'm having a really big problem getting clarity in my mixes. I listen to your mixes with huge clarity in the snare. It sits right there. It sits in the middle of the mix without being supported, and everything is 3D ambience. I'm thinking I'm making good EQ moves, but when I try to push the drums, everything else just turns into a mush of soup. Is it a case of sculpting up the space or volume thing? Okay, let's talk about a few issues here. Okay, Dave, so I feel like if you're mixing straight ITB, it's an issue of EQ, because if your EQ is right, you can move the volume up and down of the instrument, and you're not going to get any like haziness or fuzziness. It's just going to get louder. But if your EQ is wrong, if you turn it up too much, it's going to still be muddy. If it's down, it's going to be, this instrument's going to be clearer than that one, and like you're going to have a difference of clarity focus. If you get your EQ right, there'll be less of that, and you'll minimize that, and you'll be able to turn things up and down against each other and balance your mix, as opposed to balancing the EQ fuzziness. Now, ITB mixing and summing, I feel like, is a little bit soft sounding, and it's a little bit hazier than analog. Analog, I feel like, is more focused. It's a little bit more 3D and has a little bit more space, and it's more precise in like where it puts things in the space, where it's kind of like, picture like a dartboard or a piece of paper and throwing a paintball at it, and like digital to me feels like you're shooting big blobs of paint, whereas like analog feels like you're throwing a very small paintball that leaves a very dark, like, instead of like a light splot of paint or a light splash, it has like a very precise dark dot. So that's the only way I can explain it. So sometimes summing can have an effect, and I know a lot of people have different opinions on that, but I'm working on a UR and Ham enhanced fast track for analog summing, and going to try to do some cool comparisons and show you guys some stuff and nerd out. But that's something I feel like helps. Now, I did some machine head analog. I feel like it helps put things in space. But a big thing, Dave, in mixing, if you're struggling with getting something like more clear versus each other, sometimes it's not the thing you're trying to get to sound right. Like, I was doing a crit this morning for office hours for a URM enhanced person, and he was having a problem with his snare. And as I really thought about the mix, it really wasn't necessarily so much his snare sample. It was the fact that his bass was a little bit too muddy in like the 250, like 180 to 400, but around 250 area. It just had a little bit too much the lower mid, and the guitars and like everything else, it was just a little bit too thick in the vocals. And because of that, the snare was really fighting to get the punch to cut through. And I feel like as soon as he sat down and he kind of sculpted and moved around the mix, and I EQ'd the bass, but not listening to the bass EQ, EQing the bass and listening to everything else around it, it was masking. And if you guys have seen any of the URM enhanced stuff, you've done the EQ fast track, I talk about masking frequencies, and I showed a couple of examples where, sometimes it's not what you think it is. It's like the guitar is making the cymbal sound harsh or this or that. So I would say, Dave, if something that you're struggling with, maybe like getting your guitar clarity, for example, don't necessarily look at your guitars. Maybe it's your bass, maybe it's your vocal, maybe there's something else that's masking in the way, and there's a frequency buildup that you really weren't aware of that's actually making it sound boxy or less clear or too bright or something like that. So try to look around the sides as opposed to head on. Sometimes the best path is around the sides because you're going against the brick wall and you're like, I'm going up and down in volume, it's not working. I'm carving, the instrument it's still fuzzy. Sometimes you need to go around and bring the things out of its way so it opens up, and then you can move it up and down, and then you have clarity. So I would start there. All right, next question. Let me get some water. John is asking, when working with amp sims, do you have any advice for getting better guitar tones? Let me think about that. That's weird because I don't actually do any of my amp sim tones. That guy does. Say hi, Joe. That's Joe from Drum Forge, also my mix assistant. Joe is like the best amp sim tone designer. He's got to be one of the best in the world, especially with Pod Farm. Like he knows guitar tone and studies it, and like he's just a freaking nerd with it. And Joe does all my tones. So when I open up a session, it already sounds great, and I usually just have to come in and tweak it. And I feel like one of Joe's strategies to get the amp sim to sound as good as it can is to treat the amp sim chain like it's analog, meaning that if you look at a guitar tone, like for example, Korn or whatever you're trying to do, industrial, new metal, scene, gent, it's really crucial to look at what those bands did to get that sound and try to replicate it with the sim. So if they used a tube screamer, put a tube screamer. If they used a 57 off axis, use a 57 off axis. If they used a Marshall 1968 cab with a Mesa head, try to replicate that as much as you can in the actual amp sim. And I feel like that's very critical because, the sim is a simulation, but sometimes a simulation, there's like that there's mechanics of a real amp that don't quite translate into math. And I know because we have a plugin company and we make plugins, and that gives me the advantage of understanding how emulation works, and because I have really smart programmers that we've worked with, and these guys will sit down and be like, listen, here's why a compressor is hard to model, because this and this and that happens, and you can't measure this, and you can't precisely do this with math, and there's this, there's all this really nerdy stuff. So it's a simulation, and sometimes I feel like to get a simulation to be more realistic, it's the sum of all the teeny little parts and interactions to kind of make it a little bit less mathy and a little bit more random and chaotic, like actual electrons are moving. So I don't know, maybe that's wrong, but when I feel like when I experiment with that stuff and I'm actually making tones, which is very rare, I feel like I get more mileage and more realistic tones when I'm trying to recreate chains as they would be if I was doing them for real. All right, next question. Dalton's asking, how would you approach drum samples in the machine head? Most of the drums sound good raw, but it's hard to get them to cut through. Okay, Dalton, what I did for the drum samples. Well, I'm just gonna wait to the mix. It's more fun to just show you. I used a very commonly set of samples that most of you guys probably have, and I feel like when you see how simple my drum sample combination on that was, you guys are gonna be like, that's it. So it's easy to overthink that stuff. Now, Machine Head does do something, and I talked about this in the forum. They do something on their mixes that is their thing. So on their snare, I tried to match their snare almost exactly with a drum sample, but he also likes to blend in a piccolo snare sample on top of that on the rim shot to get it's just that's part of their sound. So you got to blend in a piccolo snare with like a medium pitched solid metal snare, and that's kind of their drum sound. So what sample pack or VST did you use for explosions in the Machine Head song? I used a lot of things, but I think those are all from Vengeance. Yes, Vengeance. I got to remember, I haven't opened the session in like 3 or 4 months, and I just got back. Can you guys hear me now? I just saw something you can't hear me. Yeah, you guys can hear me if you're asking questions. You guys can hear me? Yeah? Just confirm, please. Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm behind in the chat. Okay, so I got all of those explosions from a Vengeance pack, and like all the big snares and things like that were just like SSD rooms with room sample and stuff. And I don't know, just a lot of things are just like taking a sound like an explosion or glass and combining a sound, or just like sound effects you can get online for free, and then like putting subharmonics and bass and all this cool stuff in them. So just you got to make your post sound sick. If it sounds sick on its own, like Joey likes to call it a Michael Bay style, like make your shit sound like Transformers by itself, like a Transformers movie, and then put that behind your mix and then mix it together. And if you can achieve that, then you'll have really cool post. Okay, Pete's asking, I'm trying to achieve the same width of my mixes that I hear on machine head mix, especially guitar. I've used complementary EQ. It don't seem to get me there. I've tried plugins. Okay, how am I going to get more width? Peter, I don't use any wideners. The width in my mix comes from analog summing, and it comes from having Ted Jensen master the song. So it's kind of a combination. Like he's got his little width secret MS thing, and I use a really cool summing mixer, and it sounds massive. So you can't. It's hard to achieve that in the box. If I could figure it out, I would sell all that crap and do it. But I get a lot of width with EQ. But for me, analog summing, and again, summing is not for everybody, and it's expensive and it's a pain in the ass. But it's worth trying at some point in your career. Like I said, I'm working on a fast track for summing, which will be really cool. And you guys can at least hear it sort of in action, even though it's like impossible to get like a one-to-one perfect scientific comparison. But it's kind of retarded because, you know, when you compare a mic preamp, when you listen to your API versus a Neve, like you don't need a freaking blind test to figure out which one you like better on guitar or which one sounds better on the singer, you know, or the LA two-way sounds better than the 1176 or the Distressor on the snare drum today, you know, like you make those decisions right away. You can hear them. And if you're a professional and you sit in front of your speakers all day, you know, you can detect a small difference and a small change in your rig, because when you sit there all day long, 10 hours a day, and you listen to something, you change something, it's immediately noticeable. So I feel like the guys that are like anti that, either they're fucking deaf and stupid, or they shouldn't be mixing records. They should be working at McDonald's, because they need to clear the shit out of their ears. I'm a little opinionated on it, but you know, to me, it's as obvious as like, hey, the sun is out, now it's cloudy. You know, so if you've got yours in a room and developed, and you do a summing mixer, and you should be able to hear it. And if you can't hear it, I feel like, I don't know what to say. But to me, it's shocking to hear somebody say that. Okay, next question. Ivan's asking, when recording DIs, what's a good level, assuming you are going to reamp later? Ivan, I try to get it where it sounds exactly the same level going into the amp. So I try to set everything at flat. So I feel like the DI should respond to being reamped into the amp. And you can test this by recording some reamping, playing with the volume reamping. The performance should sound the same as if you record it plugging straight into the amp. It should feel the same. So I try to set the amp there. Now you can line drive it a little hotter. There's some strategies, but that's how I would generally do it. Okay, how important, John is asking, how important it is to you think to learn to set up guitars yourself? Is it better to take a local shop and see if it's done right? Okay, John, I'm a guitar player, so I learned how to set up guitars, and a lot of the guys in the shops are very expensive and they suck. If you're good at setting up guitars, their setups are absolute shit. Now, if there's somebody in your town who's great at it, let them do it. But like anything, just like learning how to tune drums, I feel like learning how to set up a guitar pays dividends, and it's worth doing. I always do all my own setups, and I'm very meticulous about it when I record guitars. And I know exactly how to set up a guitar to sound the best for rhythm, how to sound and play the best for lead, etc. So it's a skill, and it's a skill I feel like you can only learn if you're a guitar player and you spend many years honing your craft and like really getting subtle with the intricacies of the instrument. So if that's not you, please find somebody who knows what they're doing and hire them. But if that is you, it's better to just set it up in the studio. Besides, then you can charge the band for it. Be like, oh, you guys didn't get your guitar set up. I told you to set it up, which is like every band. Now you're going to pay me to set it up. And then you set it up, and then you get good guitar tracks. Van Halen drums, yeah, Travis, I do like the Van Halen one drums. They just wouldn't work on a machine head mix in 2016. Talking about all that Metallica. Okay. Okay, so what do you have prepared for us in the vault in the future? Oh, that's a dangerous question. I feel like my business partners may murder me if I tell you guys. As I've already revealed, I do have one analog summing. We very carefully take into consideration some of the things that you guys request. So we're working on some new EPs. They do take a while to produce, as you can see if you guys have watched a few of these. You know, we put a lot of time, quality, and thought into them. Then we got to edit them and video. You know, they're not cheap to make, and they take a lot of time. So they're resource intensive, meaning that they cost money to make. They're expensive. We had to build massive camera setups, and they take a lot of time. So it's kind of like a pain in the ass to make them, but in a good way. And we're really happy that we can sit down and make them. And you guys are enjoying them so much. But really, really trying to focus on stuff that we can teach you guys that's different, that you're not going to get anywhere else. Like, for example, hearing compression. That's not a course, you're going to go get at anybody else that's trying to do what we're doing, or, that's in the market space. Like, I feel like we're trying to sit down and create something really unique and fresh and give you guys something that's really real world and really helps you guys think. And it's not just the recording advice you're going to get on the internet, on the forum or whatever, but give you guys a real advantage and give you something that's going to really make you guys unstoppable. And just, so we're working on stuff that is going to solve problems for you guys and help you guys make better records. And most importantly, we're trying to address and attack all the things that we keep seeing. 8 people are struggling with this week. 10 people have commented this week that they have a question, they want us to do something. Okay, so let's attack that. So we're trying to be very sensitive to what you guys want and try to fulfill that as much as possible. Now, again, we're a 3-man team. Like I said, these are very time and labor intensive and capital intensive to produce and create. But for us, it's worth it, and we love it. And, we really appreciate very dearly all the feedback you guys have given us. And, man, if you're not part of Enhanced, even if you're on the broke side of the usership, worth doing for months to check out and go and look in some of the EPs, I feel like you're missing out. I mean, I'm biased, but I feel like hearing compression alone is worth, I'd pay, when I was starting, I'd pay somebody like $2,000 to learn that skill or be able to see that, because the day that I figured out how to hear movement and compression, like, it changed my life as a mixer. And it just really, it was like, I don't know, you guys are at a advantage. That's all I can say, because nothing like that existed when I started, nothing like what we're doing. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it's cool to be part of that. So we appreciate all the support you guys are doing and your enthusiastic adoption of what we're doing. But for those guys that aren't enhanced, you guys need to check it out. It's worth sitting down for a month and just going through to be like, watch it once and forget about it. You already know it. Some of these need to watch over and over and over again, like hearing compression. I mean, you're not going to hear compression the first time you go through that. And maybe if you're super advanced, but for anybody that's mid-level or lower, or especially getting started, I mean, it can take years to hear that stuff. So you got to keep listening, keep watching, and really absorb that stuff. I mean, the stuff goes deep. Okay, moving on. Hold on. Okay. Tyler's asking, I feel like my productions are pretty close to being good. It feels like, though, I don't know how to go from sounds good and good tones to better mixes. How does a person get there? It feels like a huge step to go from good to better. How can we get there? Tyler, I wish I could give you like, do this, and then bing, the magic light goes on, the curtain opens, and then you have better mixes. The reality is you got to work your ass off, and mixing works like this. It's like a flat line. It doesn't feel like you're getting any better. Then all of a sudden one day you're like, whoa, man, I feel like I've just gotten better. And then you look back at all your work 3 months ago and you're like, man, I sucked. And then you're like this, and then all of a sudden, boom, boom. And it's all these major revelations. So what's important is that you keep mixing every single day. You sit down, you keep working, you keep mixing, you keep working on your skills, because it may not feel like you're getting better, but you are actually getting better. You got to keep doing it, keep immersing, keep mixing different styles of stuff, meaning like if you only mix gent every day, it's cool, but gent ain't going to be popular forever, and you ain't going to have clients forever. So you have to keep learning how to mix different styles. And the more different things you mix, different styles, different challenge, the more you mix it up, the better mix of a mixer you're going to be, the more experience you're going to gain, the more you're going to be able to handle any situation that's thrown at you. And that's what I feel like what mixing is really about, because guys, I got hired to mix stuff that I would never record or accept as a producer, where I'm like, I don't even like this band, but I've got to make it sound great. And the only way I can do that is the accumulation of experience and skills that I've gained over my entire career recording. It's like, because I've worked on so many different things, like a band can come to me and I'm like, I would never listen to this band, but I can know how to mix this band, how it needs to be mixed, because I have that experience. And that gives you confidence when you're mixing. And when you're mixing, having confidence about what you're doing is so important, because when you're going in fresh to a mix, if you're not confident, you're not going to win the mix off, man. You're going to get killed. You have to come in with confidence, and it comes with experience and practice. So keep at it, man. You're on the way. John's asking, I'm new to carving space with EQ. When carving a space for each instrument, do you typically do small bands with deep cuts or wide bands with the shallow cuts, or something else? John, before you get in a lot of trouble with carving with EQ, I would do wide EQ and more tone shaping EQ as opposed to the really surgical stuff. You're getting a lot less trouble. Start there, and don't kill yourself. A little bit at a time. And just like mixing, EQ is a step ladder. It's a learning curve. You're learning, and all of a sudden, boom, you can hear better. Your frequency hearing is better. You're starting to hear more mid-range or more low end, or you can really focus on a certain part of the top end. So there's a constant progression of hearing that you grow. You can literally hear better as you do this longer and hear at a more refined level and hear more things. You can hear more masking frequencies and things like that. So again, the key is you just have to keep mixing, mix, 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 mix. All of a sudden one day, boom, you can hear better. Wow, mix, 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 better, 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 better. And then all of a sudden you look back, is bad, you're getting better. It's like, and start charging more money and people pay them. All right, next question. Okay, Carson's asking, how do you achieve this kind of snare? So I think it's really special and would like to know how you ended up with the snare sound. And even much better than Unto the Locust with my all favorites of Machine Heads. Okay, Carson, I combined a piccolo snare sample with a drum forge snare 11 was my formula. That and a little bit of clipping, but I'll show you in detail how I did. I can talk about it, but there's something about talking and showing. So just come hang out on the live stream and we'll have fun. All right, Jack asks, how many revisions did the band and the label ask to settle on the final mix? Okay, this is a fun story. I'll tell you, almost ended in tragedy. Rob called. I'm working with him on the track. I'm doing all the post. I'm kind of doing a bunch of producing, and I never really started mixing the song. It just kind of like I kind of did a mix, then we changed a bunch of shit and like cuts part out, and I added this, and I did these overdubs, and it was like we were building the song and kind of mixing it as we were going. So it ended up being like 13 revisions before the label heard it. Which is crazy because most of those weren't even mixes. They were like, okay, you've mixed the song, but here's the actual vocals. Oh, I changed the verse. I redid all the verses. I wrote new lyrics. So we kept changing the damn song. So there was never like a real final mix until like 12 or 13. And then it got turned into the label. And by that time I was so like, I don't even know. I had heard it so much. I just didn't even know if it was good or not. And I sent it into Monty Connor. And Monty just replies back, and he's just like, nah, dude, this is way fucked up. He's like, you're kicked off the project. We're going to Andy Sneap. And I'm like, fuck. Because Andy Sneap is like my favorite idol mixer of all time in metal. And like, for me to lose a band like Machine Head to my favorite mixer is kind of like, part of me expects it. Like, okay, I just, there's that 20-year relationship with Andy and Monty and Colin and all those guys. Like, it's like, me. I can't even think of a thing. It's like, I don't know. They're just so tight that it's like, how do you even break into that? And I was so pissed because I'd worked so freaking hard on the song and I'd gone through so many things. And then like, he's not even giving me a fucking chance to do revisions. Well, luckily, his mix guy, the guy who got me the gig, the guy who tells Monty if the mix is any good or not, and his second set of ears is a really good friend of mine. So I got Machine Head, and he was like, listen, let us at least get a revision in. In the meantime, we'll prep stems for Andy. So I did a revision, which was like, he gave me 4 notes. He's like, dude, we got to go back to classic Machine Head guitars. I kind of mix it a little more modern, like how Joey and I mix, a little bit more hybrid, a little bit more like, what kids would like, as opposed to like 50-year-old, 40-year-old metal dudes that are, that still want like a 2007 mix. So I kind of realized I had to go to like 2007, like Andy Sneap, Colin Richardson style metal mixing, and like that whole like Roadrunner. So I threw in a new kick. I switched the bass tone and just re-cubed the guitars, and then like added a little bit more cymbals in the mix. So it was like 4 little things. And then the next mix, I sent that to Monty. He was like, "Oh shit, this is amazing. This is great. It doesn't need to go to Andy." And then like, he put the brakes on it, but like it was crazy because it literally went from like he hates the mix to he absolutely loves it in less than 24 hours. And he was like, "I don't know what you guys did," and I'm like thinking to myself, it took fucking 10 minutes for me to sit down and make those revisions. It was literally just an issue of somebody being like, guitar tone's a little bit not Machine Head enough, like make it more classic Machine Head, get a kick and bass that's more like this album, that, and the kick more like Colin Richardson and the bass more like this Machine Head album with more swank, and then turn up the damn cymbals a little bit more. And it was just having a little bit of perspective on the mix, because again, I had 13 revisions in, and then by 15 it was like we were done and it went to mastering. So that's kind of the story with the song, which is crazy. But man, it was a real roller coaster, because we had worked on the song for 4 months, and then all of a sudden I get to the finish line and the label wasn't even going to be involved in the song. Like, this was all Rob Flynn. The fucking band didn't even hear the song completed until I had finished mixing it. They literally then brought it into band practice. It was like Dave had, but the other guys, this is like Rob's baby, like Rob's song. And he always wanted to do a song like this. He wanted to do something more radio than everything he's ever done. So that's why he called me, and he liked a record that I did. So I was pissed because like I did all the work, and then at the very end, I'm gonna have the glory stolen from me by none other than an unbeatable mixer, Andy Sneap, who's just a god amongst men. So it was like, fuck. It was such a bummer, but thankfully and luckily I was able to defend the title and keep it. And I don't know, it was nice because, like I said, I put the work in, and it's nice to be able to see it through and earn it. So, okay, Robin, welcome back. Thank you. It's great to be back. I missed hanging out with you guys. I mixed a song. I've mixed this song as usually the mix a track to get more of a live band song, but I'm having a huge problem with the guitars. When I use all the mics, it seems like there's phasing happening and can't love the music to find it. Experienced when you mix this track? Yes, Robin. The guitars, I don't know, man. I just just keep the 57s or the 421s. Just go one set. I don't know what he did when he tracked it, but I wasn't there. The guy who reamped it, Juan, I don't know. Like, I don't know what his deal was. So, all right, next. Ted Jensen is the best. Yeah, Ted is awesome. You guys know who I like more than Ted? Mike Kalasian is the shit, man. He did a remaster of this Machine Head song for me that will never come out. It was like for the Caring release, and I so wish he would have mastered the song. I mean, Ted's was amazing, but like Mike's was just like, there's something about Mike's that really got me excited when I listened to it. It just sounded like Ted just barely tweaked my mix and just added like little like 0.5%. Mike added like 3 to 4%, and I was like, that sounds good. But yeah, dude, Ted Jensen is a legend. He's awesome. Okay, trying to find the next question. Okay, Alex is asking, what kind of stereo mics techniques do you use on the overhead and the room mics, and why? Oh boy, this is a long answer. It depends what I'm recording, Alex. If I'm doing something like alternative rock, I like two microphone setups, like Recorder Man, or like an ORTFB on the shoulder, like all the stuff that we do at Drum Forge, like all those really cool organic setups, like vintage style. I love the way that stuff sounds. Getting like a really nice organic kick image, something that's simple, plays nice in the room. Obviously, I like the modern stuff, and I'll use this pair on the overheads, like every other guy who records metal, more traditional setup. But I really am into like the vintage. When I'm not doing metal, I'm really into like the vintage style miking setups, like having a kick mic and like, you know, an over-the-shoulder mic and an above the kick, just like 3 mics, you know, maybe a set of directs to throw in some samples for some augmentation to make it modern, but actually being able to use a really cool overhead sound. And I don't know, I like doing stuff like that. And that's one thing I think that's really cool about like the Drum Forge stuff, and especially some of the stuff that we're working on that isn't out yet, because we're finishing up some cool stuff for you guys coming hopefully relatively soon. Man, some of these packs that we've recorded that are coming up are really, really cool. Like we've got it's awesome. Some of the cool options. On room mics, I like the traditional far and mids. I've been playing a lot with MS. I think MS is really cool. I like some of the I don't know, this mono rooms. Like I like it all. I like to set up as many mics as I can and just experiment with different setups, because you can get different sounds and like achieve different goals. But again, when you're recording and producing, you have to think about like, what are you trying to achieve? What kind of stuff you're trying to do? Like what are you going for? If you're doing metal, obviously you don't want like a 2 mic setup, but you probably don't want huge super room mics either, because there's going to be a lot of kick drums. So keep it tight, keep it close. Use the room mics for more cymbals, ambience, and snare as opposed to kick drums, stuff like that. So you just got to think about what you're trying to accomplish. All right, how do you convince the band to use MIDI drums instead of recording real ones? Ivan. Or is it Ivan? Sorry. It's probably Ivan. If I've been messing your name up, I'm sorry. Kill me. If you want to try to convince the drums to drummer, the drummer usually has to really suck ass. And then you have to just be like, how many records are done that are just programmed drums? Like, I mean, Joey gets away with it. A lot of guys. No, I always prefer real drums blended with samples. There's something about the feel of a feel of a drummer that you can't replace yet with programming. But you gotta just I don't know, it's hard. If you want to convince them, you just got to be like, look, your drummer sucks. Either you want to put out a shitty, mediocre product and just show them the difference. Here's what program sounds like, here's what your drummer sounds like. You guys want to sound like this, or do you want to sound like this? And if you can show it to them logically, most of the band will get on board if the program drums do in fact sound better. All right, next question. Anthony's asking, where do you guys get some, where do I go to get some free stems to practice mixing? I don't feel like I'm in a position to take on many clients, but would like to practice on a daily basis. Anthony, go sign up for the Ultimate Stem Share on Facebook. It's a forum. It's called Ultimate Stem Share. Okay, Robin, Joel, I know you have Trigger, but wondering what expansions you're rocking. Have you tried the CLA expansion? What do you think about it? Robin, I like the CLA expansion. I think I have all the Trigger expansions, but I don't use it. The reason why is because, well, like I said, we haven't brought any of this stuff out to market, but anytime I want a new drum sound, we just go out and create a new drum pack and create it exactly like we want it to sound. So like I get bored with a set of drum sounds, I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to go record a Drum Forge pack and create a whole new set of sounds. So, you know, like the CLA stuff and the Terry Date samples are cool. The Tune Track stuff is cool, but all the Tune Track stuff is the same samples as far as like the Avatar stuff, only laid in and remixed. So like a lot of those tracks, like a lot of those Tune Track expansions, they don't feel like, you know, like Colin Richardson drums. They don't freaking feel like Colin Richardson drums because it's not the damn drums that Colin Richardson has on his records. It's like Tune Track drums remixed by Colin Richardson and in the style of Colin Richardson. It's not really like, you're not getting Colin freaking Richardson. You're getting like some kind of weird hybrid or something. So I don't know. I wish more of those packs were more authentic. And again, at Drum Forge, I feel like we're going to be solving a lot of that. Some of our producer packs that are going to be coming up, I think are going to blow your guys' mind water. But I'm not going to say who, when, how, what, why, or what. But it's being worked on, and they're pretty cool. So I like the CLA stuff. I think it's cool, but I don't know. I just like making my own drum sound. You know, like I don't like to copy somebody else's. I get bored with doing the same thing. I always want to change it. So that's the best way I can think about it. All right, Yvonne's asked maybe a fast track on MIDI programming for drums. Actually, it's already noted. I believe it's already being worked on. But yeah, it's, you know, like I said, we're working on so many different fast tracks here, guys, for you guys, and we're also working on something much bigger and more in depth than fast tracks. But again, I'm not going to tell you what, but we work very hard on this stuff. We put a lot of time into it, a lot of thought. We really sit down with all of your feedback. We write it down, we organize it, we think about it. We say, okay, everybody wants this, everybody wants this. How can we give them what they want? How can we do it in a cool, unique way that they're going to get a lot of value and all that stuff? Certification courses. Yes, we are working on certification courses. They have dropped, but we're going to actually have like long form courses, and there's all kinds of stuff coming. Like I said, I don't want to get too excited. There's a whole nother level and tier coming, which is going to be, I don't know, personally, I'm more excited about that than anything else that we're doing. It's something that I've kind of spearheaded, and it's something I'm very passionate about. Like it's, I don't know, like I love all the stuff that we're doing, and I'm having so much fun doing it. But for me, there's like, I have like a special place in URM for this next level that we're working on after Enhance, which will probably be like Ultimate or something like that. But that to me, when that gets finished and comes out, is going to be, I think, really, really awesome. At least I hope so. That we've already put a lot of time into it and a lot of time into developing it. And I think it's going to really help for the people that can afford it and the people that it's applicable to. I think it'll be something really special, and it's definitely going to be something really unique. Like there is nothing like this. So, but you know, the point is, guys, we're constantly working around the clock for you guys, so we can make this better. We can help you guys achieve your goals more. You know, we can just strengthen what you're doing, because we want to see you guys go out and just completely dominate. And you guys have the talent and work ethic to do it. You just got to keep going and keep working hard. So you guys have any other questions here I can help you guys out with, or are we finished? I'll give you guys like a couple of seconds here to type. I hope it's affordable. It will be. What do you think about, okay, Joel, Alex asked, Joel, do you think that compression is very important when mixing and sometimes leave sounds uncompressed sometimes? Yes. Okay, let's talk about compression. Alex, I don't know if you're part of Enhanced yet, but I'm going to say this again. Sign up for Enhanced or not, and go watch the mix, the fast track on hearing compression. I think it'll change the way that you hear compression. and really help you think about compression, not as dynamics control, not as making things punchy or louder or aggressive, but as making music come alive and using the sounds and the tones that you have and making them move and making energy and excitement and dynamics and swing come out of that. And that's what it's all about. And that's really, really powerful. So yes, I don't compress things sometimes. Yes, I do compress them sometimes, but I don't think of compressors necessarily as dynamics control. I do limiters, but not compressors. Compressors I think of as tools for generating movement in a song and like excitement. Okay, how was my vacation? It was awesome, Mason. Thank you for asking. I went to Sochi where they had the 2014 Olympics. Beautiful place. I've been there 3 times in Russia. I stay in Moscow and then I'll go to Sochi. I love Sochi. Sochi's an incredible place, and I love all the food. That Caucasian food from like Georgia and Armenia and Turkey, and it's just awesome. It's so good. It's a lot of fun. And then I went to Crimea, which has been a political hotspot. So Crimea was incredible. It just blew me away. Go on my Facebook, guys, and check out the albums if you're into that kind of stuff and you like traveling. Crimea was like just mind-blowingly beautiful. I saw so many cool things. Like I'm a history nerd, so I got to go see ancient ruins from like 2 BCE and all this stuff like that. And so it was just really wow. It was really an amazing experience. So if you guys ever get the chance to travel the world and see stuff, you go do it. It's just so enriching, and like it's such a all your friends stay home and they're missing all the fun. So you got to do it. Okay, real quick, where do we sign up for Enhance? Antonio, it's urm.academy/enhance. I'm going to type it right into the thing here. So next question. Do you have any tips on hearing frequencies to know where to cut? I mean, Yvonne, the best thing I can do to help you on that is go watch the fast track on EQ and Enhanced. It's practical EQ, like using EQ in a way that can really speed up your workflow. And just go through some of those lessons and practice some of the things in that. And I think that would be a much better explanation. Okay, Robin's asking, when I'm mixing vocals, I had to take away a lot of room ambient since it wasn't good for the mix. What do you think of that? Do you do it transient master where you drag down the sustain? Is there any other way you could do it? Okay, Robin. Yes, I've had this before where like people record in their freaking closet with a bunch of near reflections or like right in a bunch of parallel glass panes. I've had all kinds of crazy stuff like that, and it's really distracting. I feel like Isotope has a D-Reverb plugin that's really badass. That's really good at that. You can use sustain on the transient designer, or you can just add a reverb to it to do the opposite. So you can't hear the shitty cheap reverb, but you can have a reverb that fits in the track and do something more anthemic. So those are usually generally the tactics that I use. Tyler, how do you deal with the ambience in your tracks when you're looking for reverbs? Tyler, that's a hard question to answer because it's so specific to the song. Does the song need to be anthemic and huge? Does it need to be dry and tight and aggressive? Like, I just try to like work the sound that's in my head out of the mix. That's the best way I can explain it. Okay, I'm just trying to zip through this. All right, you're recording local bands and trying to build a more regular business. Where do you draw the line when people defiantly resist your advice that has conducted the final result? Oh my God, I hate that. Not coming in with new drum skins, not coming in prepared with their songs. You put up with what you get. Okay. Listen, Jack, it's a pain in the ass because local bands stay local for a reason because they don't know what the hell they're doing and they're stubborn. And I feel like you as a producer have to polish that turd the best you can, because if you can make the band sound 10 times better than they are, all the bands that play with that band are going to come into your studio. They're going to be like, we heard band X's record and we know they suck. They're terrible live. They sound like shit. Whatever you did, you're a genius. So we had to come work with you. And that's happened many times in my career where like a band hears a record, they're like, that band sucks, but they sound so freaking good on CD. Like we have to come record with you. So I'm saying always go in, bust your ass and make your band sound better than they are. Play guitar for them, resample their drums if they have shitty heads, like whatever you got to do. Make it great, because they might fight you, they might argue with you, but at the end of the day, You have to establish rapport with them and credibility. And again, that's a whole nother talk, but you establish rapport and credibility with them. And then what happens is you come in and you win their trust and you make their record sound badass. And when people come out and they hear their record and like, dude, you guys sound sick. And then they go and see them live. I'm going to give the band credit for being good. They're going to be like, you know what? You got a pretty good producer. I need to go work with that guy. So that is a very, very good way to do it. Okay, verse vocals this month are spitty and poppy and crackly at times. Tips on dealing with that? Yeah, automation, compress the crap out of them, and high pass. I'm setting up for the studio. Any tips on how to manage time? Online mixing services. Yeah, build a system that actually like handles email and build systems. So, all right, guys, I am out of time and out of breath. Thank you guys so much for hanging. I'll see you guys. I think it's next weekend. Let me check my calendar here. Yes, next weekend, 27th and 28th. I think we're going to do mix rescue here this week. So if you're an enhanced, make sure you come and hang out. I'm going to be doing it this time for the first time, and we're going to have fun. So if you want your mix torn to shreds, or maybe not, we'll see. Send it in, and we'll take a stab at it. But thank you guys so much for your time. It's been fun. Love doing this stuff. It feels great to be back. And you guys all have a great week and keep kicking ass and keep working hard. So take care of yourselves.